good. I had serious surgery almost a month ago.
Yeah.
A fantastic doctor who does not want to be named because he doesn't want to be associated with me.
Kathie Lee Gifford spent more than 3 decades convincing America that happiness could be as simple as a warm smile and a cheerful good morning. Every weekday, millions of viewers watched her light up television screens with effortless charm, quick humor, and endless optimism. She became one of those rare personalities who seemed untouched by exhaustion. No matter how long the broadcast lasted or how hectic the schedule became, she always appeared energized, composed, and genuinely happy to be there. To the audience, she looked like someone who had mastered the secret to enjoying life. But television has always been exceptionally good at hiding reality. The bright studio lights revealed only the version of Kathie Lee that she wanted the world to see. They never captured the painful moments before the cameras started rolling, when simply standing upright required determination. They never showed the careful calculations behind every step she took or the physical discomfort she quietly endured while making millions of people smile. Behind one of television's most recognizable personalities was a woman whose body had been silently deteriorating for years. Today, at 72 years old, Kathie Lee's story is no longer just about a successful broadcasting career. It has become a story about the hidden price of constant performance, a reminder that sometimes the people who appear strongest are carrying burdens no one else can see. For years, viewers believed her energy came naturally. Few realized that maintaining that image required extraordinary effort. While producers prepared the day's broadcast and guests gathered backstage, Kathie Lee often focused on something entirely different, simply finding a way to make it through another live show without letting her pain become visible. According to her own interviews, the struggle had been growing worse long before the public knew anything was wrong. What initially felt like occasional discomfort slowly developed into persistent pain that refused to disappear. Instead of improving with rest, it became more intense with each passing month. Standing for extended periods became increasingly difficult. Walking required more concentration than before. Even routine movements began sending sharp reminders that something inside her body was no longer functioning the way it should. Yet viewers never noticed. Every morning, as the familiar countdown reached 0, she stepped onto the set wearing the same confident smile people had trusted for decades. The audience saw another enjoyable broadcast. They saw laughter, conversations, celebrity interviews, and spontaneous moments of humor. What they didn't see was the physical battle taking place behind every smile. For nearly 18 months, Kathie Lee managed to keep the severity of her condition almost completely hidden. During that period, according to interviews she later gave, anti-inflammatory injections became part of her routine. They weren't cosmetic treatments or optional medical care. They were one of the few things that allowed her to remain on her feet long enough to complete the demanding schedule of live morning television. Imagine what that actually meant. Live television doesn't offer many opportunities to rest. Unlike actors filming a movie, television hosts cannot simply pause whenever they feel discomfort. The cameras remain live. Conversations continue. Segments change quickly. Hosts move from interviews to demonstrations, from musical performances to cooking segments, often remaining on their feet for several hours without interruption. Kathie Lee knew every camera angle inside that studio. But during those difficult months, she wasn't simply thinking about where the cameras were positioned. She was also thinking about how to hide her pain. She adjusted the way she stood whenever possible. She shifted her weight from one leg to the other during commercial breaks. She carefully planned movements across the studio floor so viewers wouldn't notice that one side of her body was becoming increasingly difficult to rely on. Every small adjustment helped preserve the image audiences expected to see. And remarkably, it worked. Millions of people continued watching every week without realizing that one of television's brightest personalities was quietly fighting a condition that had reached an alarming stage. That level of determination says something powerful about performers of her generation. Many entertainers grew up believing that professionalism meant never allowing the audience to witness personal hardship. Illness stayed backstage. Emotional struggles remained private. Physical pain became something to manage rather than something to discuss publicly. The performance always came first. Kathie Lee embraced that philosophy completely. Rather than allowing viewers to see her struggle, she convinced herself that the show deserved her full attention regardless of what she was experiencing physically. She believed people tuned in for encouragement, laughter, and positivity, not reminders of life's difficulties. In many ways, that mindset became both her greatest professional strength and her greatest personal burden. Because while audiences continued celebrating her resilience, the damage inside her body continued progressing. Eventually, the pain reached a point where determination alone could no longer overcome biology. On July 17, 2024, Kathie Lee publicly confirmed what doctors had already concluded. She underwent a total replacement of her right hip after years of severe deterioration. The announcement surprised many fans because she had hidden the seriousness of her condition so successfully. People who had watched her regularly found it difficult to believe she had been working under such extreme physical limitations. The operation itself represented far more than a routine medical procedure. A total hip replacement is generally recommended only after the natural joint has deteriorated so extensively that everyday movement becomes painful and significantly affects quality of life. During the procedure, damaged portions of the hip are removed and replaced with artificial components designed to restore movement while eliminating the constant bone-on-bone friction responsible for chronic pain. For Kathie Lee, this wasn't preventative treatment. It was the final solution after years of damage had reached a point where the joint could no longer function normally. Perhaps the most shocking part of the story came from the reaction of her orthopedic surgeon. After reviewing her medical imaging, he reportedly asked a question that immediately revealed just how serious her condition had become. He wondered how she had managed to continue living and working with a hip that had deteriorated so dramatically. According to published interviews, he described it as one of the worst hips he had personally encountered during his career. For someone who had spent decades appearing energetic on national television, that statement completely changed the conversation. People suddenly realized that the woman they had watched laughing through countless broadcasts had been enduring pain severe enough to astonish experienced medical professionals. Medical experts explain that this kind of joint deterioration rarely happens overnight. Hip cartilage gradually wears down over many years. As the protective cushioning disappears, bones begin rubbing directly against each other. That friction creates increasing inflammation, stiffness, reduced mobility, and eventually pain that can affect nearly every movement a person makes. Walking becomes slower. Standing becomes exhausting. Climbing stairs becomes intimidating. Even getting out of a chair can become painful. By the time surgery becomes necessary, patients have often spent years unknowingly adapting their movements to compensate for the damage. They lean differently. They change posture. They shorten their stride. They avoid certain activities without even realizing why. Looking back at Kathie Lee's final years on television, many of those subtle adaptations suddenly make much more sense. Yet one question remained. How could someone who spent so much of her career encouraging others to enjoy life ignore warning signs that had become so severe? The answer may lie much earlier in her life, long before television fame, long before morning broadcasts, and long before anyone knew her name. Because the physical breakdown that shocked doctors in 2024 wasn't simply the result of growing older. It was the final chapter of a story that had been unfolding for decades, shaped by relentless work, demanding performances, and a personal philosophy that taught her to keep smiling no matter how much it hurt. If doctors were shocked by the condition of Kathie Lee Gifford's hip in 2024, the bigger question wasn't simply how bad it had become. The real mystery was how it had reached that point without forcing her to stop years earlier. Aging certainly played a role, but according to the people who know the physical demands of live entertainment, age alone doesn't explain damage that severe. The answer lies in decades of accumulated strain, years when work always came before recovery, and performance always came before comfort. Most people remember Kathie Lee as a television personality, but her career stretched far beyond the morning studio. Throughout the years, she constantly moved between broadcasting, live concerts, theatrical productions, writing, and public appearances. Unlike a traditional office job, every one of those roles placed repeated stress on her body. Long rehearsals were followed by evening performances. Travel often interrupted recovery. Busy schedules left little time for structured physical therapy or extended rest. What audiences usually remember are the applause, the standing ovations, and the polished performances. What they don't remember are the thousands of small physical impacts that happen behind every successful show. During her years performing in stage productions, Kathie Lee wasn't simply standing under bright lights delivering songs. She was moving across large stages, kneeling, rising, turning, and performing physical comedy that demanded repeated stress on her hips and knees. Unlike film actors who can stop between takes, Theater performers repeat the same movements night after night, sometimes 8 performances every single week. Each movement may seem harmless on its own, but thousands of repetitions over many years create a completely different story. Orthopedic specialists often explain that cartilage has no unlimited reserve. Every impact, every awkward landing, and every repeated twist places microscopic stress on the joint. Normally, the body repairs much of that wear through rest and recovery. But when demanding schedules leave little opportunity for healing, small injuries gradually become permanent damage. That process happens so slowly that most people don't recognize it until the pain becomes impossible to ignore. Looking back at Kathie Lee's career, it's easier to understand why her surgeon reacted with such surprise. The deterioration wasn't the result of one accident or one dramatic injury. It was the accumulated effect of thousands of ordinary workdays spread across decades. Ironically, the very qualities that made her successful may also have contributed to her decline. Kathie Lee built her reputation on reliability. She showed up. She worked through difficult days. She rarely complained publicly. Even when circumstances became challenging, audiences expected to see the same cheerful personality, and she consistently delivered it. That mindset reflected an entire generation of entertainers. Many performers believed that admitting physical pain meant risking professional opportunities. The phrase, "the show must go on," wasn't simply a slogan. It became a way of life. If something hurt, you pushed through it. If you were exhausted, you smiled anyway. If your body asked for rest, you convinced yourself to keep going just a little longer. Sometimes that attitude creates remarkable careers. Other times, it creates long-term medical consequences. For Kathie Lee, those consequences didn't remain confined to television or the stage. They eventually followed her into every part of daily life. Simple activities became increasingly difficult. Walking longer distances required planning. Standing for extended conversations became uncomfortable. Even ordinary household tasks demanded more energy than before. But perhaps the most difficult part wasn't the physical pain. It was the emotional decision to hide it. People often assume celebrities enjoy lives free from ordinary struggles. In reality, public recognition sometimes creates a different kind of pressure. Once millions of people associate someone with optimism, confidence, and energy, maintaining that image can become emotionally exhausting. Kathie Lee understood that better than almost anyone. For decades, viewers relied on her as part of their morning routine. Families welcomed her into their homes every day. She became associated with laughter, hope, and positivity. She didn't want that image to change. That desire to remain strong didn't begin with television success. Years earlier, long before she became a household name, she experienced a deeply personal heartbreak that shaped the way she handled pain for the rest of her life. In her memoir, Kathie Lee openly discussed the collapse of her first marriage. What appeared from the outside to be a stable relationship ended in a way she never expected. One day, she returned home and discovered that her husband had quietly moved out, leaving without the emotional closure she desperately needed. It wasn't simply the end of a marriage. It was an experience that fundamentally changed the way she viewed vulnerability. She later described feeling as though she had offered her entire heart only to have it quietly rejected. Experiences like that often leave emotional scars that last far longer than the relationship itself. Instead of allowing people to see her breaking, Kathie Lee gradually built a different identity. She became the cheerful one, the encouraging one, the woman who made other people smile regardless of what she herself might be feeling. Over time, that public image stopped being just part of her career. It became part of her personality. Friends, colleagues, and audiences came to expect unwavering optimism from her, making it even harder to admit when life became painful. Then, years later, another profound loss reinforced that same belief. When her husband, legendary broadcaster and former football star Frank Gifford, passed away in 2015, Kathie Lee lost not only her partner but also one of the strongest influences in her life. Frank had spent decades as a respected public figure himself. Like many people who lived much of their lives in the spotlight, he cared deeply about how he would be remembered. According to Kathie Lee's later interviews, he preferred people to remember him as the confident, capable man they had always admired rather than seeing him struggle with the limitations that often accompany old age. Whether intentional or not, that philosophy stayed with her after his death. As her own health declined, she increasingly chose privacy over public appearances. Instead of allowing people to witness her physical struggles, she gradually withdrew from the spotlight. Life in Nashville became quieter. She adapted her home to make everyday movement easier. Rather than forcing herself through unnecessary physical challenges, she reorganized her environment around the realities of her changing body. Rooms became more accessible. Stairs became less necessary. Activities that once filled her calendar were replaced with work she could do comfortably from home. Some people interpreted that change as retirement. In reality, it was adaptation. The woman who had spent decades entertaining audiences wasn't disappearing. She was learning how to continue creating while respecting physical limits she could no longer ignore. Unfortunately, the hip replacement wasn't the only medical challenge she faced. Recovery proved longer than many expected. For months, doctors restricted how much weight she could place on her new joint while the replacement healed properly. That limitation affected almost every aspect of daily life. Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence involved her grandchildren. Kathie Lee has often spoken about how important family is to her. Yet during recovery, she couldn't simply scoop up her grandchildren into a hug or carry them around the house the way many grandparents naturally would. For someone whose love language had always included warmth and closeness, those restrictions were emotionally painful. Around the same period, she also dealt with vision problems caused by cataracts. Individually, either condition would have been challenging. Together, they created an entirely new reality. Limited mobility combined with reduced vision made ordinary activities significantly more complicated than before. It was during this difficult period that Kathie Lee publicly challenged one of society's most common expressions. People often describe later life as the golden years. She admitted that, from her own experience, the phrase didn't reflect reality. Not because life had lost its meaning, but because growing older often brings physical struggles that many people simply don't talk about honestly. Her comments resonated with countless older adults who quietly face similar challenges every day. Despite everything, however, Kathie Lee refused to allow hardship to define her. She simply redirected her energy. Instead of spending long hours under studio lights, she focused on writing. Instead of live broadcasts, she devoted more attention to music and creative projects. Most importantly, she continued relying on the faith that had guided her throughout much of her life. While her career changed dramatically, her purpose did not. She discovered that inspiration doesn't always require a television camera. Sometimes it begins in the quiet of home, surrounded by family, reflection, and gratitude. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson hidden inside her story. Strength isn't always measured by how long someone keeps performing. Sometimes true strength is found in recognizing when it's finally time to stop pretending everything is fine. For decades, Kathie Lee Gifford convinced the world that she was effortlessly joyful. Only later did people realize how much determination it had taken simply to remain standing. Her smile was genuine, but so was the pain behind it. Today, her story serves as a reminder that behind every public image exists a private reality that audiences rarely see. The applause eventually fades, television lights switch off, and careers come to an end. What remains is the person behind the performance, a woman who gave decades of happiness to millions while quietly paying a physical price few ever imagined. And perhaps that's why her story feels so powerful today. It isn't just about aging. It isn't just about surgery. It's about the extraordinary cost of spending a lifetime making sure everyone else feels better, while convincing yourself that your own pain can wait just a little longer.